Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is AJ from the Pattern Journal, and today we're talking about House of Dragon Season 2, Episode 4. This one is called The Red Dragon and the Gold. It's directed by Alan Taylor, and it is written by Ryan Condal, who is also the showrunner. Now, this episode came out last week, and I've had some IRL stuff come up, so I've been late. I apologize for that, but also, just as a bit of a general overview, I think this was the best episode of the season so far. In the previous episodes, we've seen, the greens and the blacks, they're jockeying for position. There's moves and there's counter moves, and there are tragedies, some of which, they really hit home for some of the characters. And it's all pretty much a straight continuation from the end of Season 1. And if you have been, on social media, if you've already watched this episode, then, you may be aware of some of the spoilers. For those that haven't seen it yet for whatever reason, please know I'm going to be talking a lot about the actual plot threads from this episode. So this is your big spoiler warning. Just beware, just know about it. So anyways, the main set piece for this episode is an action scene, which is the first big battle scene that we've seen in pretty much the entire show. And this is the battle for Rook's Rest, where Sir Criston Cole, who's leading an army through the Crown Lands and through the Riverlands, he's leading an army to take this small keep, which belongs to one of Rhaenyra's counselors, and the queen, Rhaenyra, she sends Princess Rhaenys and her dragon, Meleys, who is called the Red Queen. She sends them to defend Rook's Rest. What they don't know, however, is that this is all a trap between Sir Criston Cole and Aemond, and that Aemond is already near the battlefield with his dragon Vhagar. And I thought that was a really good, a bit of a twist in the story, because this is a scene where there's a scene at the start of the episode where Rhaenyra's like, okay, now I've tried everything I can to prevent actual war happening. I've tried everything. I've tried to even go into King's Landing, confront Alicent, and try to convince her that this war doesn't need to happen. But she's been rebuffed, and, there is no negotiation to be had with the other side. And now we will unleash the dragons. And for Rhaenyra, with Daemon being at Harrenhal and being uncommunicative, she has no other experienced dragon rider to send to Rook's Rest. Jace wants to go, but he has never been in battle or anything, and there are no other dragon riders for her, because, her son Lucerys is dead. Baela has a dragon as well, but she has no battlefield experience. That leaves just Rhaenys. If Corlys had a dragon, things could be so much different. Or if, it was going to be a sea battle, it would be different, because he can then, bring his experience to bear. But right here, right now, all she has is Rhaenys. She's seen battle before. She's an experienced dragon rider, and she pretty much commands the largest dragon that the Blacks have. And, there's hints throughout the episode of what might happen, because as we see earlier in the episode, and this was a really, really good scene that shows how inconsequential Aegon is as a king. He has little to no interest in being a king. He has no abilities, particularly. His council shields him, and now he's named Criston to the role of the king's hand, and things are just getting away from him. And there's a scene of us meeting with the small council, and he's talking to Aemond about what Criston Cole is doing, because he's been supposed to be going to Harrenhal with his army, but instead he's going for Rook's Rest and whatever is happening, and he's telling Aemond that, oh, you're plotting behind my back and everything. And then, it's so good, right? Aemond switches to Valyrian, and he dresses down Aegon for everything, for being a no-good king who only elevates his friends to important positions, which references some of the new Kingsguard that Aegon has nominated. and brought in, and they're all his drinking and carousing friends, you know. And the really good part about this scene is that it shows the contrast between these two characters. They're both brothers, but whereas one is the king, the other is just a prince, you know, that's not the important part. The important part is that Aemond has trained all his life to be a war leader, to be a commander. He's trained as a military man. And culturally also, he's far more accomplished than Aegon. Because as we see in this episode, Aemond speaks fluent Valyrian. Aegon does not. You know, and throughout the whole diatribe going on with Aemond, I'm like, does Aegon even understand what Aemond is telling him? And, you know, Aemond is like, so tell me, what do you think we should do? He's asked this all in Valyrian, and then Aegon responds in like a really broken version of Valyrian. And it's like, oh god, man. Like, we know some of the negative stuff about him as a character from season 1, you know, where he tried to rape the chambermaid, where he was just drinking and, you know, just passed out in a corner of the castle somewhere and stuff like that. And he has, like, the problem with the Greens is they have no emotional control. They have no emotional balance because they all have severe psychological issues. And it doesn't help that Alicent is pretty much an absent mother, and she dresses down her sons, except Aemond. So it's like, there's a really weird thing going on with this family, and this is like, what happens at Rook's Rest is pretty much a direct result of that, among so many other things. But this is very important, you know, because Aegon is like, no one sees me as a king. I'm just a rubber stamp for everything, and I want to change that. And we've already seen in, like, you know, like episodes 2 and 3 where, you know, he wants to go out on his Sunfire with Aemond and Vhagar, and, you know, he wants to do stuff that he sees as kingly. He wants vengeance for his son and everything that happens. But I think, like, the important thing with this episode is it's really brilliant character work, because we see so many different characters interacting with each other, and, you know, their personal stuff coming out and everything. One of which is, you know, I think it is set on Dragonstone, or maybe on I think it's set on Driftmark, which is a seat of House Velaryon. And Corlys's ship is being repaired, and Rhaenys goes to see him there, but she finds the man Alan Hull, and she remarks that he's quite handsome. And, you know, there's like this moment of tenderness, which, for me, it really confused me. Like, what is going on here? But, you know, there's some subtext to her conversation with Corlys that follows immediately after, which still left me a little bit confused. And I thought that maybe, you know, he was some kind of maybe he was a half-brother or something to Corlys, or, you know, a bastard brother from his father or something. But as it turns out, and I saw this as spoilers across social media and everything, Alan is actually Corlys' own bastard son. Now, whenever that happened, you know, it's pretty much like, you know, it's open interpretation. He looks like he might be older than even Lenor would have been at this point. So, could have happened a long time, you know, long time ago, possibly even before his marriage to Rhaenys. So, you know, there is that. But either way, I thought that was a really beautiful scene with these three characters, which not only highlights once again how, you know, I wouldn't say conciliatory, more understanding Rhaenys is as a character. And we've seen this again and again throughout the season, right? She was the queen that never was. She made her claim for the Iron Throne after the death of her grandsire, Jaehaerys, but instead the crown went to Viserys, and now, you know, she has some resentment for that, but then she tries to keep her family together, and she agrees to the marriage between her son Laenor and with Rhaenyra, and even after, you know, Laenor's apparent death, she is still with Rhaenyra because she believes in the family. She believes in the royal family and everything that happens. And, she's true to her own beliefs. She's not one to harbor, a great, what's the word? She doesn't have animosity towards people if she can help it. And season 1 is a great example for when she bursts out of the Great Sept with Meleys, when she's being kept prisoner there by Alicent and by Otto. She has a chance, as I'm sure people are very familiar with this by now, she had the chance to kill the entire Hightower Targaryen branch of the family, but she doesn't because it wasn't her war to start. And, that should be a decision for Rhaenyra because, she can't just take this decision by herself. She has no authority except maybe perhaps a moral authority because while she, probably resented Viserys for becoming king instead of her becoming queen, and thus, her own branch of the family not ascending in that way in the histories, she is still someone who, she believed in Viserys, nevertheless, and she supported him. So, there's so much about Rhaenys there, and this episode really highlighted how she was perhaps one of the best characters on the show. And, her compassion towards Ellen and even her understanding moment with Corlys, it shows that, she is not going to harbor any grudge. Her son is dead, as far as she knows. Lena is dead. One of her grandsons is dead. And, her family is shrinking. She knows what's going to happen with this War of the Dragons, and she's tried to stop it. But in that moment, when Rhaenyra is, she's in decision paralysis about who to send, because she wants to go herself. And she's like, no. I'm going to go. I'm the only experienced one, and you need someone with experience. You need someone with authority. And I'm going to say, the battle itself, I thought it was pretty well done. In terms of its scale, in terms of the cinematography, and, when you see Rhaenys come in, it's such a big moment, right? And it's just like, oh, wow. But, of course, Sir Criston Cole and Aemon, they hatched a plan. They went after a tempting target, and they drew in a dragon rider from Dragonstone because Rook's Rest is very close to Dragonstone. It's not too far. But, it was their plan to draw out a dragon rider and ambush them with Vhagar and, establish their superiority that way. But then Aegon, who's being derided by his mother throughout the last few episodes, especially in this one, where she's like, you think having a crown makes you wise, and you are just there to rubber stamp everything that we are doing. You have no idea what's gone on to put you on the throne and everything. And, she's like, you mean nothing. You are nothing. You have no power. So he gets all mad, and then he flies to Rook's Rest on Sunfire, and it's like, again, the moves and the counter moves, right? Criston and Aemon have a plan. The Blacks respond. And then before Aemon and Criston can respond to that, Aegon just comes in. And there's just one moment in King's Landing when Aegon goes to Sunfire. And, there's this really small moment between the Dragon Rider and the dragon. And, you can see that this is perhaps the only good relationship that perhaps Aegon has had throughout his life. He cannot connect with the people, not really. He cannot connect to anyone in his family. He's emotionally stunted. But here's Sunfire, his dragon, and Sunfire is the only one to show him compassion, to show him a friendship that that he's missed all his life, and she's there to stabilize him. But everything that happens, and even the battle itself was well done. Rhaenys comes in, she's blowing apart Cole's army. Then Aegon and Sunfire come in, And Aemon, he sees them come in, and he's just about to rise himself, but he's like, Vhagar, just stay down, not yet. And it's like, that is a good moment because it shows that despite everything, Aemon still hates Aegon. As we saw in the last episode, Aegon has always bullied him, even when they were kids. And he bullies him even now. And, this guy, he has a grudge. He has a really, really deep-seated grudge. And, he lets that get in the way of his good judgment. And, of course, Meleys and Rhaenys are just like, they just burn Sunfire and Aegon. And then, Aemon comes in and he attacks and he doesn't care who he hurts. He goes after both of them. And it's like, wow, did he just do that? So that was a huge WTF moment. But again, not the only one, right? Because by the end of the episode, we see that Rhaenys dies because Vhagar is just such a... Words really escape me, but Vhagar tries kind of the same thing that Vhagar tried with Lucerys in season 1. And she comes out of nowhere and she attacks Meleys, and with all the injuries that Meleys has already taken, plus Vhagar has her neck in her mouth, so that pretty much, it's done. But all the same, when you see that when, Rhaenys has, like, 2 chances to escape the battle with Meleys, but she doesn't, because she gave her word to Rhaenyra, and she knows what's going to happen. She has to try to stop the sacking of Rook's Rest however she can. And it doesn't really matter whether she goes back or not. And, her thinking is probably like, I need to take out Vhagar if I can. Like, in size, she's as much of a match as any other dragon that the Blacks have, if not the most. So, and we do see that, she mauls Vhagar pretty good, but ultimately, it's not to be. And we have the first, the first major death of the season, and it's like she goes out like a badass dragon rider. And those moments in the final half of the episode, they are just amazing. And the moments between Rhaenys and Meleys when they they're like talking to each other, so to speak, through their bond as dragon rider and dragon. And I've seen this so much on social media in the last week, that the dragons have a very strong bond with their dragon riders. And, perhaps the dragons are not, these unfathomable beasts, but they're more like, the relationship that a dog and his owner, or his or her owner have, or, between a master and a pet in other ways. And this is the tragedy of the Dance of the Dragons, which begins in this episode. It's not just that, the dragons died or whatever, or they were greatly reduced in number, and were never a real force after this. But it's about how, an almost sacred relationship between a dragon and their rider, and what the dragons mean for the Targaryens and for the, the religion that the Targaryens and the Velaryons and all the other families of Old Valyria, what they brought in from that faraway land, because they're seen as gods or close to it, and so thus that helps establish the divine supremacy of the ruling families, down from Aegon the Conqueror down to all the other branches of the family. And it's like you see that flame get snuffed out, and it's like Rook's Rest is the kind of battle that I wish we had seen in Game of Thrones. But of course, that wasn't exactly possible because, the decisions that the showrunners made for the final season. So it's whatever. But suffice to say, again, one of the best episodes of this season, perhaps for the entire show so far. And if there's any particular negative to this episode, I think it's some of the scenes that are set in Harrenhal. And I'm just getting a bit lost with Damon's story because he's really not doing anything here at the moment. And there's all this spooky stuff that is happening, and I just don't vibe with it. It's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting from a story perspective, but excuse me, interspersing that with all the high octane stuff that happens in the rest of the episode, with all the character work there, it's like that story just becoming a bog pit, and it's like those are really not my favorite scenes anymore. And Damon is doing stuff that feels, very. It feels very much like Damon-y stuff, and like there's some good stuff, like when he has Willem Blackwood over at Harrenhal, and he's telling him what is going on with you and the Brackens, and whether you're going to bend the knee to Rhaenyra or not, and stuff like that. And yeah, that's some like good stuff, and I'm sure it is going to build up to something later down the line. But given how small the season is, just 8 episodes, and this is episode 4, so this is like the halfway mark, and I'm sure his story will go somewhere, but right now there's really not much going on there, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna do some spooky stuff, and Damon is probably going to go mad, so that's gonna happen. And it's like, yeah, not really enjoying that, but I do love that they're bringing some of the stories together, other than that. And all the tension that's brewing over on the greens and over with the blacks and everything, I think there's something going to be explosive happening towards the end of the season, like possibly episode 7 or 8. I've never read these books, so I have no idea what's going to happen. I know a little bit from some of the wiki stuff I've read. I just can stop myself, like learning, how Aegon dies and everything, or one of the some of the treasons that Rhaenyra is going to suffer. But I think I'm like relatively free of important spoilers for at least this season, I suppose. And there's probably going to be season 3, maybe a season 4. I'm not sure how they could, take it that far. But yeah, that's pretty much this episode. The Red Dragon and the Gold. And of course, the Red Dragon is Meleys, the Red Queen, and Sunfire is the Gold Dragon, because, her scales are like sun. They reflect the sun or whatever, or they're golden, so to speak, I suppose. And, symbol of her being the dragon for the king in King's Landing. So, yeah, mostly I thought this episode had a really good pace. There's some brilliant stuff done in the second half with the Battle of Rook's Rest, how it's shot. We, for the first time, we see, at least in this show, we see dragons going at it against each other. And, there's really good moments where Meleys is fighting Sunfire and Vhagar is also there. So there's like this, 3-way battle going on. And, the shock and horror that Kristen Cole experiences while the battle happens. And, because he's never been on the receiving end of a dragon in war. Far from it. And this is like, he just goes crazy pretty much. And he's out of his depth. And, you'd think it would be a humbling moment. But knowing the kind of guy he is, yeah, I don't think he's really going to learn his lessons. And it's going to be a pretty stupid trajectory as normal for Sir Kristen Cole. So, yeah. Anyways, that's it for this episode. I'm really looking forward to the next one. I haven't watched it yet before I do my review today for this video. So I'm gonna be going and watching that after this, and we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that we get some more conflict stuff happening in episode 5 as well. I don't want it to be a bit of a downer once again, but we'll see what happens. And just make sure to check this area, check the channel and my social media for the video for that episode, and hopefully it'll be in a couple hours or something. So just watch out for that. Anyways, guys, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.